So version 1.2 has been released, and as promised, it is time to redo the performance test. Kuro has promised about a month ago that they will work on the game performance for this version, and something quite odd did happen indeed, as you will see later in this video. Now, I installed the update on day one, and I've been playing the game a lot since then. I had absolutely no problems in the first day after the patch has been released. I have played the new main story, very little problems to basically no problems, because it was smooth 90% of the time, much smoother than before, that's for sure. I got the new character, which is pretty cute, so obviously I am not going to skip on that. However, today they have released a very small 480 megabyte update, and that made the performance exactly the same as it used to be in version 1.1 and 1.0. So I have absolutely no idea what Kuro did again, because right after the patch, right after the big patch has been released, the game honestly was running really good. Now, well, it's back in the old state. Unfortunately, there is still no Vulkan support, and to be honest, the only true way to actually get Wuthering waves to run properly is to get the game to run in Vulkan, as I mentioned before, and you will see a little example at the end of this video of a properly optimized game running in Vulkan, which is very similar to Wuthering Waves, runs in the same engine as Wuthering Waves. So I think that's going to be quite fun to check out, just for a little comparison between OpenGL and Vulkan. I'll be using the same applications that I used before. Again, all of these applications that you see here are free to download on the Play Store from the internet. You can repeat the test if you like. I actually encourage everyone to test the game out the same way I'm testing them out, because you really do see what's happening under the hood of the device, and it basically gives us the accurate and true picture of why a game runs bad or why a game runs good. Now, the only difference today, I will be using the simple system monitor for the CPU temperature, because the simple system monitor shows us the temperature for all 8 CPU cores. Meanwhile, the other application that I used last time only shows us a complete temperature scale on the chip. I prefer per core because it actually shows us what core is being used the most, what core is being used the least, based on the heat output of the core. The more heat is being emitted by the processor core, the more is that core being used, same as on the desktop machines and consoles. I mean, it's a processor in the end, so it has the same way of operating. This little window will show us the power usage, which is also, I would say, very important. And just to show you how this little application works, it's a very nice application. I like the fact that it shows us the power usage in watts, which is very important. That's the power draw by the components, by the CPU and GPU combined. And just to show you the power usage on display, just to show that it actually works properly, a little benchmark for the GPU, and the second I click on that, it goes to 7 watts, which is about what you would expect from a Adreno 1042 to use on full speed. Maximum frequency 790 MHz, that's the peak and full speed of the GPU. The lower the GPU frequency, the less the GPU is being utilized. The higher the GPU frequency, the more of the GPU is being used. OpenGL games tend to not use the GPU at all, since OpenGL is a bit outdated, It is designed for old generation GPUs, for very old GPUs, and it does not take advantage of modern hardware at all. It creates a huge CPU bottleneck and CPU overhead, which is the reason why most of these games run bad. It's OpenGL's fault, it's the API at fault. Now, one important thing to note, the device will be running with the Samsung GOS disabled, which means that it will be running full speed, which is this little click here. Now it's using the default Qualcomm's power management, and just for a testing device, control device, if you want to call it, I bought this huge thing, a big tablet, and yeah, this huge thing here runs the game the same way as my phone does, with a completely different chip. So that definitely puts the phone blaming out of the question, since this is a totally different manufacturer, totally different chip, but runs the game the same way. The chip is also pretty fast as well, a flagship, since I don't buy mid-range anymore, but also a flagship chipset in the tablet, so the phone runs it the same, and a totally different device runs the game the same way. It's definitely not Samsung's fault in this case, especially since they allow us to use Qualcomm's default power management, which is the main reason. If you want full performance on a Samsung, just turn on the lab option for alternate performance, and lag will just disappear for other games as well. That's the main reason why you might find FPS drops on a Samsung device. It's the lab option needs to be enabled in order to use full speed. And the GP watch will show us the API and of course the frame rate occasionally that I enable on the GP watch window. Sometimes I use something else, sometimes I use the GP watch, depending on which one is accurate for a certain game. For Wuthering Waves, I will use the GP watch for the FPS. Now, let me show you the options that we will have in the game. And then I'll show you something very funny that you can do with the game files. But first, let me show you the game settings. Obviously, it will be played on a maximum graphics. I gotta give a little bit credit to Kuro. I feel like the game does look a little bit better. I mean, maybe in some ways a lot better than before. I've noticed when I compare the game on my phone and on my PC, I can say the game does look identical visually. I can see some small differences in shadows, which is a bit weird, but I guess it's fine. But graphics and everything else does seem to be identical to what I see on the PC. Of course, on my PC I use the NVIDIA control panel to tweak the settings a bit more, but on default it looks about the same. I would say graphically looks the same. So they definitely did bump up the graphics, I can see that. But at the same time there was no performance impact, so they can easily do more graphics wise. It will just run fine without much of a problem. And of course, I mean, it wouldn't be a 1.2 update video without the new character. And honestly, I mean, she's kind of cute. Okay, glasses do something. I mean, what? But yeah, let's go to the settings. They added a little new option though. Impact based on enemy material. I don't know what that does. I haven't noticed much of a difference. I keep it on anyways, but everything is maxed out, everything is at the highest possible level. So that's the things that I'll be using for this test, as usual, as always. That's how you do the test. And also, I mean, the game does look nice. The character looks very good. Good design, definitely good design. Visually, as I mentioned before, I noticed a lot of graphical improvements, at least on this device. Now, I said that I'll do something pretty funny with the game files. You can actually do the same thing on your device. A rooted device might benefit the most, because with a rooted device you can actually tweak a lot more. My device here is not rooted, will not be rooted for a very long time to come, but you can easily go to the data folder, and you can actually increase the render resolution, increase the quality. You can do whatever you like. Kuro does seem to give us the option to tweak the game files when it comes to the config file, and you can easily find the config file. Just follow the path that I'm doing here and go to config, go to Android, and just find the game user setting, and this is basically the little window that you want to mess around with. You have some default options, but you're free to increase this if you like. I actually have something quite funny planned. I want to put the PC version, the PC game files, into my mobile device, because it's the same thing actually, same game, and then tweak this out. Maybe I might be able to unlock something quite funny. That's one thing I want to do. I'll probably will be one of the next videos, but yeah, you can easily tweak this out. And yes, the game does actually run well in 2160p, which is 4K. Again, this thing has a pretty beefy GPU. I wasn't joking when I said that this thing has a beefy GPU. It's able to go 4K in this game, 60 FPS without a problem. But we will be using the default for the test, since obviously not everyone will be running the game at 4K, and obviously 1080p is more than enough, and you can easily just go back to the game, launch the game, and play with the customized settings. It is one thing that you can do, and might improve performance. I mean, depending on your device, I guess. You can increase the resolution, decrease the resolution, improve the quality, do stuff like that. I think you can even add more lines from the PC version of the game. I will also try that out. Might give some pretty interesting results at the end. But anyway, let me just log in to show you that this works. It's not going to break the game. I mean, obviously, I've been doing this for quite a while, literally zero problems. And honestly, I mean, the game does look better than before. That's, I guess, the credit that's the credit that I can give to the developers. They definitely made the game look better than before, that's for sure. But unfortunately, they did miss a huge, important aspect of improving the game, and that's the API. Not only because, you know, Vulkan is simply better, but future Android versions, Android 15 for example, will not have OpenGL support. So there's a good chance that OpenGL games will simply not work anymore on the upcoming Android version. So if they want to keep the game on the Play Store, they might have to go with Vulkan, whether they like it or not, because there is a good chance that OpenGL games will be kicked out of the Play Store. Now, of course, I know it probably will not happen, but there's also a chance that it might happen, since OpenGL is definitely much worse than Vulkan when it comes to performance. But Android 15, that I will be installing, by the way, is going to be able to translate OpenGL through Angle in Vulkan, and that might get messy. So if Kuro Games really wants to ensure good performance now and in the future, they need to go to Vulkan API, whether they like it or not, since new devices, even older devices that will get upgraded to Android 15, will drop OpenGL support. That will be gone. And that's a good thing, because OpenGL ruins experience for games. Literally it ruins experience for games. It's outdated and simply not really good for modern hardware. And well, time for me to play around with the new character as well, and time to test out the game. As you can see, OpenGL API is creating a rather toasty 95-94 degrees Celsius CPU temperature. It actually uses 2 CPU cores. I have set the temperature monitor on the value. The GPU is the third value there at 74, while the 2 CPU cores are at 94. It's honestly impressive how 2 simple CPU cores out of 8 on this thing are able to get this game to about 60 FPS. Not 40, well, I mean, definitely cannot expect stable FPS with OpenGL on such a complex game. But still, 2 CPU cores. I finally got my answer on how many CPU cores the game does use. It uses 2 of them, 2 out of 8. Which does create a rather big CPU overhead, or to make the term easier to understand, it creates a bottleneck, a artificial bottleneck, not because it's a weak CPU, but because it's not using the whole thing as it's supposed to be used. Now this particular chip has 3 different types of CPUs. Cortex X3 big core, Cortex A760 and Cortex A730, and it has the small cluster, 3 small cores that are there for light tasks. But that really doesn't mean much when you are in Vulkan, since in Vulkan all 8 cores do stuff, do basically the thing that they're meant to be doing, work in a synchronized manner. And Vulkan also does push a lot of work to the GPU, which means in result you do get, maybe in some cases, a bit more RAM used with Vulkan. Maybe in some cases, well, definitely a lot more GPU is being used, but in return you get much more stability and you get less heat. Now heat is a very important factor when it comes to a mobile device. Heat is the nemesis of mobile devices and handheld devices. And Vulkan does solve that by basically making the whole thing work in such a way that it avoids overheating, since not all cores are going full speed 100%. All cores work at 10-20%, which is much better than having 2 cores work at 100%. Those 2 cores will draw a lot more power than those 8 cores running at 10-20%. And the byproduct of that is also much less heat on the 8 cores, and the GPU can also be utilized, saving even more power. I mean, Snapdragon GPUs, for example, are one of the most efficient ones and most powerful ones. So in this case you really want that thing to be used a lot more. So unfortunately with Wuthering Waves that's not the case. You can see the usage go to about 475 MHz, which is about 35 to 45%. It does have different speeds, different governors on how the GPU will behave and how much of it will be used. But on this game, you will never see this GPU to run full speed. It never happened, it never will happen on OpenGL. It's impossible on OpenGL to take full advantage of the GPU of modern devices, which is honestly a bit sad because, as I mentioned before, I tested the game out on this device and I tested the game out on a completely different device, a tablet, and same result. You get the same FPS, literally. Like, if I could copy paste the FPS, it was exactly the same. It goes to 60, 57, 55, 54, 45, 47. It is the exact same thing. And the funniest thing is that there is quite the big power gap between the devices. Both are flagships, but the Snapdragon definitely has the much faster GPU. But it didn't matter in the end, because that GPU is just doing nothing. And that's the main reason why the performance is Not not exactly terrible. I mean, if you ask me, it is pretty terrible for my standards, because this is not really a graphically demanding game. The last four, three generation of smartphone chips released, chips from 2021 and up, should be able to run this game 60 FPS on maximum things without much of a problem, since it really is not that graphically demanding. It looks nice, yes, but you get 60 FPS with barely 30% GPU usage. So if this GPU is like 3 times more powerful than a smartphone GPU from 2021, then that smartphone GPU from 2021 should still run the game at 60 FPS with about 80-90% GPU usage. That's a rough estimation, not exactly the most accurate, but it's pretty close, pretty accurate. So it's pretty accurate on a grand scale of things. So yeah, there should be no reason why this game will run, or should I say runs as poorly as it is. And that's the OpenGL API. Again, main culprit here is the OpenGL API. They go Vulkan and we will enjoy smooth, crisp and clear gameplay of Wuthering waves, like in Great Haven for example, and Zenith Zone Zero. Those games for example are they run really well. The power usage has been what we would expect from this ship. However, I find it funny, and this is something that I have to roast Qualcomm a little bit, because they said sub 5 watt. Really? Sub 5 watts? Yeah, not exactly 5 watts, it's more than that. And you can technically say the same for all the chip manufacturers. They always say a smaller number. That's probably the average, 5 watts average, yeah, I can get behind that, but 5 watts peak? No way. Nope. That's not gonna happen with the modern chipsets. That's not possible. I would say it's a miracle that they're as power efficient as they are with how much performance they bring, because just a couple of years ago such performance that we have now would kind of be impossible without using at least 50 or 60 watts, and that's already getting to desktop territory here. So on one way, I don't like that they say sub 5 watt power use when it's obviously much higher. On the other hand, it's a good job for actually making such a efficient chip. And again, it's just a fun thing, because AMD and Intel does the same thing when you look at how much power they draw. My desktop CPU is rated for 125 watts. I'm fairly sure that thing can draw 200 watts when it feels like it. That's just the way it is. It probably does draw that much. So yeah, it's usually a little bit higher than they say. Anyway, my apologies for the little distraction. Thought it was a bit funny to mention that. I mean, so far, when I compare the performance now and before, you will see some very weird. The thing that made me say that it's actually the same or maybe a little bit worse than before, I encountered some very weird stutters, okay, like out of nowhere. The game will just freeze for a second or two. Now, I think I've had the same thing happen in the last video, maybe once actually. Could be that it happened once, but in this case, when I recorded today, it happened I think twice. So that's the thing that made me sit and think, okay, this might actually be a little bit worse than before. So that's, I guess, one thing I noticed. But the game worked so well. I'm very sad that the performance dropped after the... I don't know what they did really. Kuro messed up something again. I'm fairly sure of it. Because right after the update, I think I've had flat 60 FPS. I was, again, playing the story. I completed the story. I obviously got the new character. And I was doing bosses, I was farming and doing stuff like that. I didn't notice any FPS issues, no freezing, no drops, nothing. Was actually, I would say, was actually running really well. I don't know what they messed up. I don't know. I really don't know what they messed up. Did they revert settings or something? Did they bring back something from before? I have no idea. Absolute no idea. And that's the most disappointing aspect of this update, because I was looking forward to actually being able to enjoy the game properly. But I mean, I guess I enjoyed it for a day. I guess a day. That's something. But yeah, performance is pretty much back to what it used to be. Maybe slightly worse in some cases. Maybe slightly worse. The graphics, I guess graphics definitely improved. One thing I have to say that they did well. The graphics improved, while the overall performance did stay about the same. Which does, again, show that the hardware is there, but Kuro needs to do a bit of coding again, and they really need to bring Vulkan support. I mean, based on the numbers here on the GPU alone, again, I did 4K 60. I did play the game at 4K before the update arrived. Before the little update arrived that messed up the performance, and was running really well. Unfortunately, it's still no Vulkan support. But I would say did run fine. I'm trying to listen. I've heard something loud outside. Not really sure if it's thunder or something else. It was a pretty rough weather as well today. Crazy weather, actually. You should see the wind. I thought that the tree would start to fly. But yeah, and now the FPS is slowly going down, and this is something very odd that is not only... I did not notice only that on this game, but I noticed that on Genshin as well. It is honestly kind of fascinating how these two games are so different, but at the same time they're also very similar. The thing that they both have in common, they suffer from the same problem. OpenGL is messing up the performance on both games, with the only difference being Genshin technically should support Vulkan, but MiHoYo does not like you having 60 FPS, so they turn Vulkan off. If you change the option, you can get banned for tampering with game files on Genshin. That's what happened to me. My account got yeeted because I actually had proper 60 FPS. This game, I don't know if it supports Vulkan. I did not see any Vulkan code in the game files myself, so I don't think it does support it yet. If it did support it, would run in Vulkan probably, but it doesn't. And also, the other similarity, both games actually lose FPS over time. Now, Genshin is made in Unity, this is made in Unreal Engine 4. Two completely different engines, and yet we see the same damn problem on both games. Isn't that kinda interesting? Isn't that kinda interesting? Now, I myself have no idea why that's the case. I'm going to blame the API. I'm fairly sure that's the API doing some things, but There could be something else in the background that's similar in both games that has the same effect on both Unity and Unreal Engine. I don't know what that is. I will have to install Genshin again and play that again to see what happens. And also very curious to see if that game has Vulkan support. If any of you does play Genshin, and if you can actually check the API on that game, please do check and please do tell me in the comments down below. Does Genshin run natively in OpenGL or Vulkan? I'm very curious about that, since that game does have Vulkan support. If you go in game files, if you go into the config file, you do see the Vulkan option, and you can pick between 1 and 0, 1 being use it, 1 being to enable it, and 0 to disable it, or was yes or no, or something like that. But you definitely could use Vulkan if you change the game files. That's from my memory back in the day when I was tampering with that game to test it out. Okay, so overall, I mean, I'm still very sad that the game doesn't run that well. I really would love if this game running Vulkan would be flawless, but unfortunately that's the way it is right now. No Vulkan, no FPS, and no stability with such a complex game. That's just how it is. There is no running away from it. OpenGL is simply not going to deliver good performance on complex games. OpenGL's time was over a long time ago, and developers should really stop using it in 2024, especially when there is much more powerful APIs out there who ensure fantastic performance even on older devices. Even several-year-old devices can easily run this game smoothly maxed out 60 FPS if only Vulkan API was available for Wuthering Waves. And I would say that's the single most disappointing fact, that the game just runs the way it is. It's a good game. I love the game. Obviously I play it and I'm going to be playing it. It's just so annoying when something so simple and straightforward becomes a huge problem that is still in the game, still playing the game. And the most annoying part is it's not only this game, it's a lot more. I don't understand why everyone just goes with OpenGL all the time. Well, not everyone actually. You will see very soon. You will see a game that actually has Vulkan. And if you have been paying attention to the FPS graph, you see the stability. You see how it constantly goes up and down. It's never stable. It always goes up and down. It's never really, stable at 50 or 60. It goes from 60 to 40, 60 to 40 all the time. Again, that's due to the OpenGL API being just outdated and not suitable for this game. You'll see a huge... I mean, if you've been following for a while, you already know what to expect from Vulkan. I already played a bunch of games that have Vulkan, and those games are super stable. The most consistent thing is the difference between FPS, between Vulkan-based games and OpenGL-based games. Vulkan always, 100% of the time, is more stable, looks better, and overall uses much less power than OpenGL-based games. Doesn't matter the complexity of the game. Complex games run much better on Vulkan. And yeah, that's just the way it is right now. So, you probably saw all the numbers there. I don't have to say anything. I mean, same as 1.0, same as 1.1. Barely any difference, if any, after that mini update of 480 megabytes that seemed to have broken the game. It was a completely different experience before that little update. I was prepared to actually be happy with the performance test of Wuthering Waves in 1.2. Unfortunately, it wasn't long-lived. So, a game that I wanted to show you real quick. It's Exile. It's this little cute game, paid game, but honestly worth buying. And it's one of the very few open world games that runs in Vulkan. Everything is maxed out. It's made in the same engine as Wuthering Waves, Unreal Engine 4. Now this game is definitely a lot more graphically demanding, has a bunch of options that Wuthering Waves is missing. It even has ray tracing enabled by default, I believe, depending on your device. This device has ray tracing by default, so it's just enabled by default. Open world, huge game, and let me pick a stage. You can see Vulkan API in the... wait a second. Sometimes it does glitch out. The little window sometimes does glitch out when there is all sorts of windows on screen, but yeah, there we go. API Vulkan, resolution 2340 by 1080, runs natively. It can technically be upscaled to 4K. I actually think I used the upscaler, so the resolution on this game is definitely upscaled to much higher than 1080p. That's just what the GSR does, or FSR 2. I actually forgot what upscaler the game is using, but definitely is upscale from 1080p. Now let me pick a map here. You will see a lot less power being drawn by the game, and you will notice one very important thing. Look at the GPU window there. Look at the little GPU monitor. Yeah, the GPU is definitely much happier in this game. Now the game sometimes will, when it's loading, it can drop frames. That's normal. It's just normal loading. But when it loads everything, yeah, flatlining at about 60 FPS, much more stable than Wuthering Waves, that's for sure. And don't worry, I will be walking in some larger areas. I'm just trying to remember where I need to go here. I've been playing the game back in February of this year, my apologies, and I loved it. It's a very good game. I definitely highly recommend to check this game out. It's worth it. This game is made by the same developers who were making Enfield, Ark Knights, and the classic Ark Knights game. I find it pretty funny because when we compare the workforce, I think Kuro Games is much larger than Ark Knights, and I believe Kuro definitely makes more money with Wuthering Waves now. But Ark Knight developers seem to code much better than Kuro Games does, at least based on the games that I've played from Ark Knight developers. This game just runs flawless. There's just no FPS drops, no freezing, no nothing. Flawless 60 FPS from start to finish. And this is what Wuthering Waves would play like and would probably look like if only Kuro Games went with the proper API. And I said I will be running around. I did say this game has very big render resolution, very big draw distance. You can pretty much load the whole map on this game. And yeah, there we go. Use quite a lot of the GPU. One of the few games that can push this GPU to its limit, and still retaining some very good FPS. You can also see the GPU temperature is much higher than on Wuthering Waves. That's obviously the thing to expect. And a little loading. You can see the smoothness when it drops frames. When it loads, it's actually very smooth. You don't even notice it. You would only notice it when you look at it. That's also very nice optimization here done by the opposite. The game does have the areas where you might have some problems. I think that actually has been fixed though. I can't remember, but it used to have some areas that could be problematic, but those seem to be gone now. And yeah, Overall, I think I messed up now. Yeah. Well, I am definitely not able to play this game with those windows, since a very important dodge button is covered by the windows. But in any case, that doesn't really uh, matter in this case, since we are showing the FPS. And on this game, actually, my phone can throttle. You will see throttling kicking in a moment. A little bit of throttling here and there, which is fine. I've been playing for an hour, 2 or 3 already, so it's okay if the GPU throttles a little bit. Surprisingly, no throttling was noticeable on Wuthering Waves, since the game did run about the same from start to finish, which is kind of funny because I actually would expect throttling in that game, but it can throttle if it's not being used, I guess. And yeah, this little game is one of the very few games, one of the very few open world games that that runs in Vulkan, and it has a good story. It's honestly pretty good. But yeah, one example of the magic of Vulkan. It's not. I mean, it's not magic. It's simply code. It's simply code. Much newer code, meant for modern hardware, and yeah, it simply works flawlessly. Now let me just do one more thing, since I know there will probably be someone saying, "Oh look, it has no grass. Grass has a big impact on FPS." Well, actually, grass does have impact, but not on FPS. Well, in some cases it can, but grass impacts RAM memory. Wuthering Waves uses about 3.1, 3.2 gigabytes of RAM on average. This game uses 5 up to 5.5, and recently, as I noticed, 6 gigabytes of RAM, so twice as more RAM as Wuthering Waves. But let me just go to a very grassy and rather large area, and also good to show you the GPU throttling. You will see a direct correlation between GPU frequency and FPS in this game. Something that you will not really see being that apparent in Wuthering Waves, since the GPU in Wuthering Waves isn't really doing much. 60 FPS, whether it's 295 or 500 megahertz, and there is no difference in Wuthering Waves. But on this game, it does have a rather large impact on the overall smoothness. And yeah, 53, it's starting to throttle, definitely starting to throttle. There we go, it throttled to 40, but it is pretty stable 40, which is again pretty funny when you think about it. It runs 40, but it's not stuttering, it's not like lagging, it's not doing it's not misbehaving. And again, that's due to throttling. Let me just try to trick the phone into going full speed. This phone is actually pretty smart. It knows to outsmart me. Usually on older devices, when you do the alt tab thing, it goes back to full speed. Oh, this device, no. I had to actually take a little break for it to kick in. There we go. FPS back to 60. And you can see the GPU frequency going pretty high now, and see all that grass? Yeah, it doesn't really kill the FPS, does it? It doesn't kill the FPS at all. It is smooth. There we go. You can run around. I mean, the game is very pretty. I love this map because it's huge. All of this is... The draw distance is pretty crazy on this game. I love it. You can see the grass all the way to the other side of the map, and that's pretty impressive. Well, let me just walk around a little bit more. Yeah, there we go. I just love that this game is just this game should be used as a benchmark, really, because it's actually demanding, and as you can see, it runs really well on the... Oh, did you see a little... That's loading. That little dip That's loading kicking in. Anyway, let's wrap this video up here. So, overall, one thing that Kuro Games needs to do is definitely switch to Vulkan. After all, Android 15 is around the corner and OpenGL will be bye-bye with that. OpenGL finally is being kicked off the support on Android, so we will see what will happen with games. I think it will still run, but will be a mess for sure. So not only Wuthering Waves, but a lot of other games that are still in OpenGL might. There is a good chance that they might just disappear from the Play Store because they will simply not support outdated API anymore. So I really hope that they do add Vulkan API. That's the only thing that this game needs, honestly. A Vulkan API in Wuthering Waves, and we will stop having performance issues. I'm saying that from how long have I been playing games on this platform? 5 years. In the 5 years that I've done this, I've been doing the YouTube thing, or maybe 6, I don't know when I started, actually I forgot. Vulkan always had better and superior performance than OpenGL, and that's just full stop there. Developers really need to go with Vulkan, and they need to stop using OpenGL because OpenGL is just outdated. It needs to rest. And well, with that being said, do tell me tell me how the game runs for you actually. Did you notice the same performance dip after the little hotfix that they had a day or two after the main update, or is there something else happening there? Do tell me because I'm very curious about that. But with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed. If you would like to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. And with that being said, stay safe. As always, I'll see you next time.